like the this framework and these the thesis behind the bullish view on crypto, but I wonder if we might bring it back a step and say you have a background in currencies, so
Yeah, yeah,
we've talked about a little bit about the dollar.
yeah.
I don't know if you feel that it too is the cleanest dirty shirt, and I wanted to frame this in the context of the recent sanctions that have been enacted, and the idea now that asset and treasury is going to be seized, and so what that does for the dollar reserve currency, also the petrodollar system coming undone if in fact Saudi Arabia starts to fully cater to the East, particularly to China. And so the Pax Americana was already on its way out to some extent, or everybody could kind of see the writing on the wall. But now that seems to have been precipitated by recent events. So I wonder if you might contextualize gold, currencies, and crypto in sort of this relative game of currencies.
Yeah, absolutely. I would kind of make a distinction between the price of the dollar right now, the ups and downs of the dollar, and whether the dollar is the dominant currency in the world. So, for example, the dollar's been the dominant currency since pretty much, you could say, the First World War, definitely since the Second World War. And over that period of time, so since the Second World War, the dollar has gone up lots of, for 10 years, it's gone down for 10 years, gone up for 10 years, gone down for 10 years, gone up. I mean, it's followed this long-term cycle. So, and during that entire period, the dollar was the top dog. So we kind of have to separate out whether the dollar is strong today or not from the dollar being the dominant currency. So what do we mean by dominant currency? What we mean by dominant currency is that it's the most used currency when it comes to global trade, that people, if they have to pick a currency, they pick the dollar, whether it's a commodity, petrodollar trade, related trade, whether it's if you invoice an importer or exporter, you'll pick dollars. If you're dealing in a non-US country, they won't pick euros, they pick dollars. Reserve managers, central banks, which currency do they hold? Do they hold the dollar or do they hold another currency? And then financial transactions. What's the dominant currency in financial transactions? Which is the most transactions in the world is in financial. And what we've seen is over the last 10, 15 years, the dollar is becoming more and more and more dominant. So today, the dollar is more dominant than it's ever been in terms of the use in financial, in everything, so it kind of sounds odd, but it's used more than ever before. And so in order for the dollar to be toppled, you need a couple of things to happen. One is, the key thing for me is who can replace the dollar in the financial system, in financial markets. So for example, with interest rate swaps, bonds, equities, the trading of everything in the world, who are the alternatives? It can't be crypto, it can't be gold. They're too small. They're minor players. It's either the euro or the renminbi. They're the only two players that matter because euro's a big enough, economy. But what euro has shown after the Russia thing is that Europe is subordinate to the US, in some ways. That Europe will just basically follow whatever the US says. So Europe isn't really really going to push this that much. So China is really the alternative. So the question then is, does the rest of the world want to hold Chinese renminbi? And that's not clear to me. So,
and does China have the capacity? I mean, one of the benefits of the US dollar is the depth of financial instruments on which you can park these dollars. So the depth of the Chinese sovereign bond market, the threat of capital controls.
Yeah.
All this suggests that the U.S. continues to be the cleanest dirty shirt because
absolutely.
When push comes to shove,
kind of my view. And China, in some ways, if you look at what they're doing, they aren't necessarily trying to replace the dollar on the global stage. What they're doing is strategic bilateral agreements. So they recently did an agreement with Indonesia where all their trade will be in renminbi. All the trade between China and Indonesia will be in renminbi now, not in dollars. Previously, it was in dollars. They then have to sell dollars to buy renminbi. Malaysia, the same. They're trying to do that with Saudi. But even if they do it with Saudi, it still doesn't mean that the world will want to hold renminbi. It's just that particular trade transaction that's between China.
The funny thing there is that those are both pegged to the US dollar.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So sure, do whatever you want. It's still pegged.
Yeah, I mean the real test is, will a non-Chinese country want to do a trade with Saudi in renminbi or not, or would they say I want it in dollars? So
Right.
it's always about the third country. That's the point
Gotcha.
about the US. So if you look at the size of the biggest economies in the world, so Europe, is one of the biggest economies. They favor the dollar over the renminbi for sure. Brazil, who are they going to pick? The dollar. India, for sure, not the renminbi. They're going to pick the dollar. Japan, the dollar. So when you start to kind of get to the nuts and bolts, it's not clear.